Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Ooh. Wow, look what's coming. There's a snowstorm. Oh my. Look at all that snow coming. There's a snowstorm.
Adi's not impressed.
It's nothing for Adi. Oh well. There's Joe. Hello.
Good day, mate.
And that looks like Nilesh, and that is, and there's Roseanne. Hi, Roseanne. Hi, Nilesh. And so here we are. We are doing Yoga Sutras. I don't know why I'm talking funny. I'm hanging out with Raj. And so we're down here in chapter 3. The internal is seen to be external. I know this is going to sound not terribly impressive, but this is one of my favorite parts of the Yoga Sutras. And of course, the humor of that is that whichever one you're working on seems to be the favorite. But I actually quite like this one. So it's sort of one of those turning points. It's a little bit like many people will talk about Wednesday, the day of the week, Wednesday, because in a Monday through Friday work week, you're halfway through. So Wednesday afternoon, you're halfway through your week. And so here is not quite a halfway point, but there's a real fulcrum here in this one because it's a turning point where we've been doing all of this preparation stuff. And then we get to samyama, which we talked about last time. And this is the tool, which is the combination of dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, concentration, meditation, and the deep absorption called samadhi. And then collectively is called samyama, which then is applied to the ever subtler aspects of our being. Then we can set aside identities with vairagya, non-attachment. Hi, Rosalind. Namaste. And there's Gurvinder. Hi, Gurvinder. Hi, Nellie. Boy, I just wasn't watching there, and everybody popped in. And so, anyway, here the internal, that which was a moment ago seen to be internal, is now seen to be an external event. That's the spirit of this section, which I think is kind of neat, just to even ponder this, that there's a point where that the boundary line between out there and in here moves inward. Maitre's over there going, yeah, she finds it neat too. So we're sitting here right now, the 1, 2, 3, 4, there's how many of us? There's 6 of us. Yeah. So there's the 6 of us sitting here in the living room of the ashram. And so we are in here. Mm-hmm. And then the world is out there, outside of the ashram. So this is our in here. And if we go into the meditation room and we sit down quietly, doesn't take terribly long. We've all been doing this for a while. It doesn't take terribly long. And now the other, if I'm sitting there, if any one of us is sitting there, and then the other 5 are sitting around the room, all of those other 5 people are now out there. And in here, I have turned inward. And we all know this. And so what has happened? The boundary line between out there and in here, the boundary line itself has shifted inward. And this is a beautiful, elegant, I think, way of describing the entire process that we're doing in yoga. So then the boundary line, all the other 5 people are now out there and I'm in here. Well, guess what happens after you do this systematic process and you're your posture, your sitting posture is actually, your asana, rung 3, is actually comfortable and steady. What happens? You turn your awareness to the smoothness of your breath. And now your physical body to you is now external. Sounds odd. And so if you're sitting comfortably, you forget that you have feet. And we all kind of know this. We just sort of like forget the arms and the legs and like that. And then there's a one way Swami Rama says it somewhere that I always quite liked. It's lighthearted. He says, the feeling that you are not breathing is an encouraging sign, is what the phrase is, encouraging sign. It doesn't mean you're not breathing. The physical body still needs oxygen, so the breathing is still going on. It's gotten pretty slow. And the boundary line between out there and in here has now moved inward to the point that the physical breath is an external event. Now, see, I now have an external event here called a couple, we call it ma-bucks. I have a ma-bucks. Cheers. Very nice, thank you. And there's the ma that goes with the ma-bucks. Where is she?
Yeah.
She's lurking over on the side. Anyway, isn't that fascinating? So I will, let me bring up the sutras here. I'll bring this up and I'll pull this down now that we know where we are. Okie dokie, there's the actual sutras. And the way in which Patanjali talks about this in the sutra itself is a certain level of samadhi is now an external event. So should we read all this or just kind of talk about it? What do you think?
Read.
Okay, Ma wants to read.
The skin of our body is usually...
Wait a minute, did I put, oh yes, I've got it, never mind. Go ahead, sorry.
The skin of our body is usually seen as the boundary line between inner and outer. The world is out there, and the aspects of me are in here. In the beginning, it seems as if stilling the body, calming the breath, and dealing with the senses are inner practices. However, the perpetual boundary line...
Perceptual.
The perceptual boundary line itself moves inward as we move along the steps of meditation. Once you move past the stilling of the physical body and are well absorbed in awareness of the breathing process, it starts to seem as if the body itself is external or out there. When attention moves further inward, beyond the breath, and into the sensory processes of the mind, both the body and breath are external or out there. Once the mind truly begins to concentrate, dharana, the perceptual boundary between inner and outer has moved significantly inward. The body, breath, and sensory process themselves, all three seem to be external or out there, while we are at the doorway of the deeper realities that now seem to be the only realities left, which are internal or in here.
Now, the shocking thing is, as we sit out here having conversation about this, think about the next logical step of this. Imagine that you move in even further and that you're down in that latent unconscious level. Now, the conscious thinking mind is now an external event. It's now totally external. So when we're doing beginning meditation, we say, oh, how do I get rid of these thoughts? How do I get rid of them, right?
Mm.
But gradually, I'm going to put this up so I can point. So I'm sitting here, I've come inward from my body and my breath, and I'm sitting here. these are coming forward, and I'm saying, how do I here in conscious mind, how do I get rid of those thoughts? How do I get rid of the distractions from the world out here that are coming into my senses? You know, I'll put earplugs in because I can't handle the sounds. I'll get a sleeping mask and I'll put it over my eyes because I'm not able yet to let go of this world out here. Gradually, we're able to do that. And then we come and here we are in the conscious mind. Now, imagine this one. Imagine that you have receded inward to the point that you are operating from the latent unconscious. And this is what we're attempting to do in Yoga Nidra. If you're in the latent unconscious and you're conscious of it, then where is the conscious, the normally conscious mind? It is now an external event. That's why when we use language and we say waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, there's something about that that's a little bit misleading. Because waking appears to be a location, but it's not. It's a state that happens in a plane of reality called Vaishnavar. Dreaming is something that we do in the plane of reality called Tejasa. Deep sleep is something we seem to do in the plane of reality that's called Prajna, in this level. But once we've actually come inward to this level, the normally thinking surface level of mind is now an external event. It's external to me. And so if it's doing anything at all, we don't care. It's like if we're sitting here and
watching fireworks from a very quiet place.
Watching fireworks from a very quiet place. But if we're successfully sitting here in the living room right now, though, what did I count us up to be? There are 6 of us.
Yes.
Keep forgetting to count myself. If the 6 of us are sitting here with all of you, then what are we doing in relation to the cars going down the street down there? We're doing absolutely nothing. We don't have to get rid of them. It's just for us right now, they don't exist. Pretty neat, huh? Anyway, so.
There's people, more people?
There's more people. Joe Conte. Hi, Joe. Hi, B. There's B. Eileen, good morning. And there's a Rojo, but there's a Rojo over here, too.
Hi.
What happened to you? We have 2 Rojos. There's Inika. Hi, Inika. Hi, Johnny. Hi, Rosalind. Hello, Urban. Did I miss anybody?
I don't think so.
So, anyway, I'll come back here. Ma was reading. Did we read all of that?
Compared to seedless samadhi near bija, the boundary line moves so far inward that even concentration, meditation, and the lower samadhis are external.
Yeah, and so, see, that's actually in the sutra. Now we'll look at the sutra, Sutra 3.8. This is just, that's why I was saying before, this is one of my favorite spots. Many of them are my favorites.
He says that every week, but that's okay.
But this one is really neat.
Yeah, it is.
Because it's such a tremendous, amazing principle when we are out here in the external world and we're talking about this stuff and we're learning about it, to realize, wow, this actually is really what happens. Yeah. And even Patanjali made a point of saying this, that this stuff is external compared to nirbija samadhi, the samadhi without even seeds, let alone gross thoughts.
When your leg falls asleep and because you don't do enough asanas or walking or exercise, but when you're sitting too long, but you're sitting for meditation and the leg falls asleep, sometimes you only notice when you come back out of meditation.
Yeah.
And thus it tells you really
and you can't get up off the floor.
Because if you would have been with the body and you would have identified with the legs, you would have noticed that it was falling asleep when it was going into that falling asleep mode. And I think
Very good
it's
example.
really one of the first thing that if you have experienced that, it really shows you that things can go nirodha, which you thought to be so
fall
you.
away, yeah.
It's thought to be so you.
Yeah. That's a good reminder. I like that way of saying it.
These are 3 practices of concentration, meditation, and samadhi.
It's not these are, it says these 3.
Where are my glasses?
I don't know.
Here.
Click.
These 3 practices of concentration, meditation, and samadhi are more intimate or internal than the previous 5 practices.
Note here that these are rungs 6, 7, and 8. And so Patanjali even makes the point of pointing this out to us, that the first 5 rungs of yoga are in the last chapter. They're in the chapter on sadhana. It's called sadhana pada. And so they are part of sadhana. These 3 are not part of sadhana. Now, we don't have to debate whether they are or are not sadhana, but the point there is that there is a big shift in what we are doing. Everything that we are doing in all of the first parts of the Yoga Sutras, all the way through those first 5 rungs, they have something in common. And now all of a sudden we're doing these 3, and that was in the last couple sutras. Now he says these 3 are more internal than the previous 5. Why did he not put that in there at the point between asana and pranayama? You see, he could say, now we're going to do pranayama. And pranayama is more internal compared to the yamas, niyamas, and asana. And it would be a true statement. But this one has some real punch to it by being here. Now we are really diving into the internal world. And what's happened is that the boundary line is moved. These are more internal. And as they are more internal, they are more intimate. And in translating these things, this is what we struggle for words to try to describe this. You know, antar. And it would be a true statement. But this, can you turn that on? Thank you. So anyway, there's something has just shifted when we come from those first 5 rungs to the last 3 rungs. There's something different there. So here's the punch. Here's a real punchline that Patanjali is giving us about this.
And you said something like that you were stuck with words and you started talking about the antar.
Yeah, antar. Antar, thank you. Antar, it's one little bitty word. But then what, as we talked before, yoga is traditionally oral tradition. You sit around and you talk about this stuff. And so what was it? Matri just used the example a moment ago when you're sitting there and your foot goes to sleep, becomes numb. And so that's not written in the book, but it's a really nice observation. And so how did it come up? Because we're sitting around together having conversation about this stuff. And that's what brings life to it. So then we do not have to be intellectuals and scholarly side of people and have debates over the Sanskrit etiology of the root antar. We just keep talking about it. We look at what Vyasa, what Swami Rama, what people say about these things, and we get an idea about it. And Trayam, these 3 are more internal, inner, or intimate than the previous angas, rungs, limbs, accessories, components, steps, parts, members, constituents. And so as if that's not enough, then the next sutra, he's going to talk about even samadhi. So in these 2 sutras, he's talking specifically about 2 boundary lines. And this is why I talk about the many boundary lines. So we come into the living room of the ashram, we have a boundary line that's this room. So the meditation room is in that direction. The meditation room is a different location. It's out there compared to the living room we're in. The road outside with cars driving by and the restaurants in the neighborhood and the other businesses that are around us, those are now completely external events by comparison to the totality of the ashram. I'm sitting here looking at Yvonne and Adi visiting from Netherlands. So guess what? Netherlands is now a very, very external event compared to the fact that you are now captive in the USA. We have captured you and we have taken you hostage.
And still we like it.
Yeah, still you like it. You're hostage in the living room, you're hostage in the ashram, and you're hostage in the USA. And all those other duchies, they are now way over there. Right, Nellie?
They were until you started talking about it.
And yeah, and so now I start talking about the duchies and Nellie.
And the bond is so strong, they're immediately here.
And yeah, and yeah. And so then we've expanded our thing, and now the boundary line may be the whole skin of planet Earth. And now in the movies, we can have wars with the Martians because this is our planet, and those are those foreigners from the planet Mars or some other galaxy or something. We went to see Star Wars movie yesterday. And so what were they identifying with? They were identifying with their galaxy, right? Did I see that right? I have trouble following Star Wars movies. But I think their point of identification was with their galaxy.
Yeah.
And so there's a fight for who's in charge of that galaxy. And what small thinking that is. I'm going to identify with my galaxy compared to all those other galaxies. We're going to ignore them. Notice the phenomenon here. But here we're talking about the journey inward. So this principle is being introduced here, that these three, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, collectively called samyama, which was introduced in the previous sutra, that the name for those three together is samyama, which then becomes a tool for us to go ever deeper and deeper. There's a boundary line here. These are more internal. We already said this, didn't we? You want to read it?
When asana pranayama senses are seen to be external, they have been left behind and fall away from awareness. This is much like the way the external world seems to vanish for us when we are intimately involved with our body and breath awareness practices. It is as if the body, breath, and senses no longer exist for us. We have gone beyond them, now truly entering into the mind field. The mind field is now perceived in a very different way compared to the noisy monkey mind when earlier trying to just sit still.
And notice the fact I want to say here, notice the fact that this is one of the ways that all just plain old ordinary people in the world enjoy feeling really rich and filled with joy. You get together with a friend and you go to a music concert. You go into the auditorium and there's the orchestra or the piano player or whoever it is in the front. And all of the people in here, you just completely absorb in this inner experience that's inside of the auditorium. And the world out there falls away for you.
And we
Isn't
like
that so? What about when, as a couple, when you're romantic, when you're having a sensual, sexual encounter? What happens to the rest of the world and other people, friends or foes? What happens to all of them? They are now completely external events, and you're overwhelmed with the enjoyment and the joy of this moment together.
You forget even your body.
You forget even your body. It just becomes so tremendous. So we all already know this principle. We're living it constantly. It's just that most of us never learned in our childhood or our schools or parents or anybody that this boundary line keeps moving inward. And so if the music concert or the sexual encounter, if those were good, it's just think how good it must be if we just keep coming more and more inward.
Pointed.
Yeah. Coming inward, inward, inward. The boundary line, just amazing, isn't it? Are you going to be with us here, or should I go on?
I was
She's off
moving
in her-
I was moving the boundary line.
She was moving her boundary line inward. Ma!
When asana, pranayama, and pratyahara, body, breath, and senses fall away or are left behind, then concentration, meditation, and samadhi are seen as quite intimate or internal. The boundary line between out there and in here has significantly shifted. We are now ready to explore the subtle realities and
Subtler
subtler
reality.
realities and to begin the process of setting those aside as well. That is Vairagya.
Now that's subtler, and I'm going to shift this here just to point this out. What that's basically saying is that now we're prepared to allow the boundary line to come in even more and start to explore this and this, the unconscious mind. That's where we're going. If we've done all this well, we finally get to the point that we are willing and able to do this. And that's the one that none of us originally wanted to do. But as we come to this juncture here where there's a even further going inward, then we become willing to do that. Pretty neat, huh?
Yeah. There's a comment.
It's 8:30.
There's a comment. Nilesh said, hello, everyone. Johnny is there, empirical, yes. Johnny's pointing out that we're doing empirical. Yeah, it is fascinating, isn't it, Roseanne? And so, okay, there you go. And so here's the next sutra here.
No, one sentence.
I'm sorry.
Still seeking the eternal self at the core of our being.
Yeah, so there's the point where there's no longer any boundaries.
There was a question for Rosalind.
Yeah.
Okay. Does all this flow naturally? How does this occur? Yes, it flows naturally, Rosalind. It flows naturally if, get ready for this, if we have understood the early sutras that said the whole foundation is built upon abhyasa and vairagya. If we have an understanding of non-attachment, then we realize, wow, I really am attached to my external world out here. And as much as I say, yes, I want to go with you to that Yanni concert, that there's a part that says, but I'm busy in my job and I'm busy with my family and I don't have time to do that. Does that sound familiar? It's the resistance to moving into the auditorium.
That's why it feels it's going against the stream.
It feels like it's going against the stream because there is a natural stream. A fancy word for this is adhyasa. And I don't think Patanjali uses this word, but adhyasa is that natural impelling force to move outward. This is what Shakti does. Shakti moves outward. Because of avidya and maya, we naturally move outward. We move outward and then we veil behind us. I move outward and I leave behind. And I move outward and I leave behind. And we come out here into this world. So as much as that is natural, if we understand something about the principle of non-attachment, then when we are following Shakti back into where she came from, then it's a very natural event. All we have to do, all we have to do is not cling to the world out there. So we're standing on the street in front of the auditorium, and here's Matri and Raj standing there. Say, come on, Swamiji, come on, let's go into the Yanni concert. Come, you'll enjoy the music. And I'm sitting there saying, no, I have to be online with all the Dutchies. We have satsang to do. This is a completely ridiculous example, but this is the way life is. It's completely ridiculous that we get caught up in the dramas out here in the world, because there really is something naturally pulling us inward. And the magic that helps us along the way inward is called Guru. It's the grace of pure consciousness that's saying, okay, now that you've decided to turn inward and try to play with this moving inward about boundaries, as Patanjali is saying in these two sutras, now that you're willing to do that, grace of Guru will come and help pull us inward. So that's the principle. Does it flow naturally? Yes, it flows naturally, but for most of us, I think you know this, for most of us, this natural flow we resist by kicking and screaming. No, I can't go there. We do what Arjuna did. He didn't want to go inward and do that and encounter all that battle of life, all those enemies on the other side of the unconscious line. Says, I want to run away. I want to maintain my ignorance and run away. Matri is writing words or drawing a picture. I don't know what she's doing.
That's okay.
She's having a note to self.
Note to self. You can't read it in Dutch.
She wrote Dutch. I can't even read it.
Secret.
It's a secret. It must. It's beyond the boundary of out here. So
yeah, you said pulls it to itself, and that's one verse of the Bhagavad Gita. And I should just. So I'll go talk with Adi later.
Good. Okie dokie. I guess Rosalind kind of got it because she said thank you. So
what is Nelly posting now?
Nelly posted, it's a little guy
running
with it looks like a little wheel sort of thing. It's hard for us to see what it is now.
It's like this big.
It's very, very
It's
little.
big.
It's like on our screen, it's like what, 2 millimeters?
It's
Yeah.
a running girl.
A running girl, and what's behind her? Oh, that's the girl sign, the female sign.
Oh,
A circle with a plus sign underneath it.
anyway. So here we go. I will turn that off. We're turning off Rosalind.
I wish we had a bunch of buttons like that, like a control panel. Senses, flip, 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 flip.
But we kind of
It is
do.
kind of
I
like
know.
that.
All right, do you want to keep going here?
However,
However,
these three practices are external and not intimate compared to near bija samadhi.
so even dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, listen to this.
Holy cow.
The samadhi, rung 8. Almost everybody who I have ever met, including the people who are running yoga teacher training programs, as well as the certified yoga teachers, think that if they know anything at all, they say that the goal is samadhi of the 8th rung. Rung 8 is the goal of yoga. Look here, I'm sorry, that's not a true statement. These three practices, including that samadhi being referred to there, are external and not intimate compared to nirbija samadhi. Those are external events. Have you ever heard that before? If you've been hanging around when we've done this before, you've heard it before, but it may have slipped your mind. I'm supposed to be quiet here. Montreal wanted to be reading, and I'm taking over your job. Now you can read it. You can read it in the nice, sweet Montreal tone.
But I did already.
You already read this one?
Yeah. But you stopped me here. So
Okay.
I'll continue. Which is samadhi that has no object nor even a seed on which there is concentration. I was just going like, there's a long way to go.
Near
The time
bija.
is short. No lollygagging.
Now we may find this literal near bija samadhi difficult to do, but we all get glimpses of the process that is somewhat similar to this near bija samadhi. You're sitting in the meditation seat, you're sitting there, and thoughts are going on, and you're aware of body and you're aware of breath. And it may not be near bija samadhi, but isn't it true that from time to time you get even 1 second? 1 second of very, very quiet. And it's as if everything just went away. And I want to suggest to you, it may not be quite near bija samadhi, but it is an inferred experience of the nature of where you're going. That, wow, for 1 second, I sat there for 20 minutes, and I know there was 1 second in there that there was this incredible experience. And most of us will look at that and just brush it off and say, well, I had an okay meditation, but I was thinking a lot and I couldn't get it to be quiet. And we overlook the fact that there was one incredible second in there. And if you got a troublemaker like me saying it, maybe you'll notice it more. Maybe you'll remember that in your morning meditation today, there was such a 1 second. And it's a signpost for us that says, wow, if I had 1 second of that kind of quiet and I was still alive, I was conscious, and there appeared to be nothing going on in my mind. 1 second. And then we can have a party. We can dance with joy over that 1 second. Nobody will ever write to me and tell me, wow, Swamiji, I had 1 second of incredible silence. Everybody writes, says, I sat for 2 hours and for almost all of the 2 hours I was miserable. How do I get miserable? Was there any part of the 2 hours that you were not miserable? Well, yeah, but not really. What do you mean, not really? Well, at all? Anything in there? Well, yeah, and I'll work them down to getting to 1 second. You say, okay, please value the 1 second, because that's our glimpse. Because it may not be totally near bija samadhi, but our experience is that we would read this and we'd say, it was as if there was not even the seed of a fear. There was not even the seed of an anger or a frustration or a desire or a hunger. It was as if I was devoid of all of it. And it was only 1 second. So why should we not feel joy?
When you put it that way, this seems more accessible.
It seems much more accessible. And this is just me speaking, that I'm saying it like this is why the yogis and the sages have seemed to, in one voice, said, to borrow from the Western Bible, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It is always very, very, very close. So it's accessible. And we should feel joy over the 1 second. Because during the 1 second, we did feel joy. But then what happens is that boundary line moves back outward, and we say, oh, I'm a failure because I wasn't able to stay there. It was only 1 second. Ego gets pretty greedy, doesn't it? But instead, what we should do is say, how incredible this was. Maybe the next time I sit for my meditation, it will be 2 seconds. I will have doubled my moment of silence. Doubled. 100% increase. I went to 2 seconds. I've never had anybody tell me, wow, I had a really incredible meditation today because I went from 1 second of silence to 2 seconds of silence. I've never heard anybody talk like that other than me.
We set the bar too high.
We set the bar so damn high. I'm not going to do anything unless I can get up from my seat today proclaiming myself to be Buddha. And when I can do that, then no. Anyway, Matri, come back, Mom. I know you don't want to.
The three-part process of concentration, meditation, and samadhi are practiced in relation to objects. Nirbija samadhi is seedless samadhi and has no object, not even the tiniest little bitty seed of an object. From the vantage point of this seedless samadhi, the process of samyama, dhyana samadhi, comes to be seen as external, just like happened in the case of the first 5 wrongs is mentioned in the last sutra. Thus, eventually, all 8 wrongs of the Yoga Sutras come to be seen as external practices when considered in relation to Nirbija Samadhi.
Listen to the shock of that comment. Wow, I'm going to go do yoga. I'm going to go deep, deep meditation, deep inside. I'm going to do these 8 wrongs and go deep, deep into meditation. But there comes a point where all of that is an external event, and that's Nirodha.
So,
Yoga's Chitta Vritti Nirodha.
so in the 8 wrongs, the samadhi, which is used as or the samyama, which is used
Yes.
as a tool to introspect, there is an object you're introspecting.
Yes.
And that is why
Even
Nirbija-
if the object is, for example, the Jnanendriya of hearing.
Right.
It is an object that it is an instrument that is used to engage with the world out here so you can listen to the Yanni music.
Right.
It's an instrument that Manas uses the instrument of the Jnanendriya of hearing so that it can operate through the central nervous system and the brain and the little eardrums and those little bones in here so you can sit there and be absorbed in taking in that music. But it's all instruments. Yes.
Even
Awesome.
seeds.
Huh?
Even seeds.
Even the seeds. And when we talk about the seeds, in this moment, you have transcended even the seeds, which are samskaras that would
then
otherwise.
you're really at this boundary edgy kind of thing.
Yeah, to do that, you're basically
here,
basically right about here or here.
or whatever.
You're somewhere right in here because
you're at the cliff of the end of the mind.
And this is the higher meaning. This is the Nirbija Samadhi. And so when we talk about the difference between Samadhi and Turiya, it's right here. This is Nirbija. If we have to put it on the chart, we would put Nirbija Samadhi here. There's a whole bunch of seeds. There's a bunch of samskars.
Wow, that explains the
when
journey from one to the other.
Yes, when all of those seeds of the samskaras are in latent form, we get a very high order of insight. That's why they call Anandamaya Kosha. There's nothing but bliss because all of the samskaras are in seed form. Why do you and I enjoy deep sleep in bed at night? Because it's all in latent form. We're not dreaming. We're totally inert, and all of it's in latent form, but it's still not Nirbija Samadhi. And it's not Turiya. That's not a criticism of Nirbija Samadhi. It's just not the same thing.
Yeah, so if the conscious mind has expanded so much that all of this has become part of the conscious mind field and even expanded so much that there's hardly any unconscious left, and you are in samadhi on one of the seeds, is bija samadhi, and that drops away. And
yes,
then
it's Savitarka Samadhi, Savichara Samadhi, Sananda Samadhi, Sasmita Samadhi, and then finally you get Asamprajna.
No, there you're back.
I refresh.
There you go.
Okay, I should be back now, but now we also lost our thing here. Am I back yet for you?
Yeah.
I am. I'm back. Okay.
Voice,
Fully back.
picture, everything.
Fully back.
And
Okay.
snow as well.
Something happened here. This has happened before, not often, but has happened from time to time, that everything on my screen here just disappears. And all I have to do is refresh the browser and it comes popping back up.
Be live, just move internal.
Be live moved internal. So now what was I starting to say?
Nirbija.
Near beach, yeah.
Samprajnana, asamprajnana.
Yeah, so there's all these levels of samadhi and it sounds, what was it Yvonne said, this sounds very difficult.
Terminology.
I'm just wanting to ask you, yes, of course it sounds difficult, but I know I was trying to tell you a story. There was some years ago, I would have a beginning meditation course and I would do it. We would meet once a week for 6 weeks. I was only able to do it a couple times. I wanted to repeat it again. A fellow showed up and said, I want to go through that. We didn't have any other people. It was only him. And I said, if we ever have 6 people, we'll go through it again. And so a year went by and he would come by at least once a week at 6 o'clock in the evening and just sit for meditation. Usually he was there 2 or 3 times a week. And it was about a year later, one day after meditation time, meditation 6, about 6:30, he says, I have a question. And he said, I'm having trouble with this meditation stuff. He said, because I'm having thoughts in my mind and I don't know what to do with them. And I looked at him. He was sitting like I'm sitting, Adi's sitting over there. It was like he was sitting there, I was sitting here. And I said to him, do you remember what you were complaining about a year ago? He gave me a funny look. He said, no, what? I said, a year ago, you were complaining because you could not sit still. I said, you just sat here in that chair for 30 minutes and you didn't move. He had not noticed that because he had become so comfortable with that boundary line moving inward that he was now able to sit for 30 minutes. And I mean, I know some muscles probably twitched or moved a little bit, but mostly the man did not move for a half an hour. And he didn't notice that he had made that progress. I'm telling you the story now, and it still sits with me, the amazement of that moment of saying, do you remember what you were complaining about a year ago? And he didn't remember. And all of a sudden, as soon as I said it, then he remembered. And then he saw the awe that, wow, I have made tremendous progress. And we never even had the class. All he did was show up and sit. And so the fidgeting body that was itching and moving and squirming like that, it just all subsided over the period of the year. Anyway. Yes, sir.
Sometimes they use, talking about different samadhi terminologies, they say nirvikalpa samadhi is the highest samadhi. Is it similar to nirbija, or are they really referring to?
I don't know who says that nirvikalpa is the highest.
Or maybe I just read into
it. Oh, okay. And yeah, I just took a glitch there. A vikalpa. Remember the 4 things that Patanjali talks about in Sutra 17. Vitarka, Vichara, Ananda, and Asmita. All of those are vitarkas.
Vikalpa is everything.
No, they're all objects.
They're all objects. I'm sorry. Yes, I said they're all vikalpas. Right. Yeah. And so all 4 of those are savikalpa. They are all with a vikalpa. It's just that there are 4 levels of subtlety. So there's a savitarka, there's a savichara, there's a sananda, there's a sasmita.
Just like they're all samprajnata.
But they're all samprajnata. They're all with the prajnata. They're all vitarka. And so nirvitarka See there, there's the language.
Yeah.
Near vikalpa means I've set aside those. Then you could have a scholar's debate. Well, so is near vikalpa the same as near bija? And there's a subtle difference because near bija, because you can have near vikalpa
With the bija.
and sabija,
Right.
and you've got the seeds. You still have the seeds.
Okay, now.
So there's a subtlety to it.
So Nirvikalpa is still somewhere here, but Nirbija, if you want to put it
That's
on
probably a good place to put it.
Yeah.
What is your point? Yeah.
And I would suggest everybody don't get terribly concerned about this. So where did you just put? So the near vikalpa is probably somewhere right about here. We've let go of all the, but yet you can. Okay, keep an eye out, Adi, and tell me that when it comes back, it should come back.
Yeah, we're back again.
We're back. Okay. All righty. So we are back again. Here, I'll put this here. And so anyway, I was just mentioning to everybody that I ran this experiment years ago, and I found something like 65 different kinds of samadhi. And my takeaway from that at the time was it gave me a greater insight about the nature of the word samadhi. And so when you apply dhanana, dhyana, and samadhi, when you apply that to anything, you can give it a new name. So, for example, here is a pen. I'll show you this. Here is a pen. And so if I go into samadhi, I can call this practice pen samadhi. All that's happened is it's a different thing. I go into samadhi on a different object. And if I'm going into samadhi on seeds and scars, I will call that sabija samadhi. If it's a gross object, a gross level object, that's called a vitarka, and so that's called savitarka samadhi. And if I transcend all of those vitarkas, those gross objects, that shift is called nirvitarka. I went from savitarka with vitarkas to nirvitarkas, where the vitarkas fell away. And after I have savitarka, and then nirvitarka falls away, then what's the level under that? The subtle impressions, those are called vicharas. So now I have savichara, and when that falls away, I can have nirvichara. So this is the process. And so that's how I ended up with that research. I found literally in those sets of commentaries and glossaries and descriptions like this, something like 65 different usages of the term. And so there's an elegant simplicity to that usage of words once we see it in that kind of way. And so we don't have to get thrown off like that. Hi, Daniel. Hi, Jao. And say, only snow on the screen. Yeah, that's because we crashed and I had to refresh the browser. And when we do that on here, I don't have to leave BeLive. It's just my picture disappears off the screen and all that's left is snow.
So, Swamiji, I feel like if I hear this, I think that I have been in some sort of samadhi. I cannot call it, cannot describe it, which one it is, but in some sort of samadhi many times.
Most of us have been.
Yeah.
And so
I thought I didn't reach that point at all. But
one of the chapters in the Tripura Rahasya, one of the later chapters, addresses this quite nicely. Maybe you remember some of the examples. But there it uses a phrase that I don't know what the Sanskrit is, but it gets translated as samadhi-like. I mean, it's somewhat like samadhi. And I love that phrase because then we don't have to end up being caught in our own internal debate or confusion. Was it samadhi or was it not? When you're listening to that music concert and you're so completely absorbed in that music that there's nothing else, we can say, well, that's a samadhi-like experience. When you have the best sexual encounter of your life, and there's nothing else other than that in that moment. Is that samadhi or is it samadhi-like?
samadhi-like.
Yeah, and I just want to say, who cares? It's the principle where we understand that concentration leads to sustained concentration, which is the definition of dhyana that we translate as the word meditation. And then when we become so absorbed in that is as if there's no longer a me observing that. It's like all there is the music. All there is the intense passion. And that's the samadhi, or the samadhi-like. And it's a tool, this samadhi-like phrase, the way it's in the Tripura Rahasya, they use different examples there. I don't remember what examples.
When a lion jumps out of the tiger jumps out of the blue, and
is that one of them? Yeah. When a tiger jumps out in front of you,
you forget everything, who you are, whatever. You forget yourself.
All of those problems go away. And our modern version of that, if you've ever been in an automobile accident where it happens, people will talk about how there was a timeless moment. Just, when the impact occurs, everything went in slow motion. People describe it. It's a samadhi-like state because of the car accident, the crunch. And so we all have glimpses like that. And I'm just suggesting the notion that using the phrase samadhi-like helps us answer the question without saying, was it or wasn't it?
Yes. But since a couple of days, every time I hear the word samadhi, I keep replacing it with, for myself for a moment, with deep absorption.
Mm-hmm.
And then I find out, okay, there are different levels of deep absorption, and maybe the best deep absorption is the objectless deep absorption.
Yeah.
And then there's this.
And note there, when we say object-less deep absorption, the word absorption starts to fall apart, doesn't it? Because you say, well, you have to have an object to have absorption. Here's a way of holding that. What is the mental stance that you are in when you are in deep absorption? There's a certain mental stance in that.
It's still a mental stance.
It's still a mental stance.
Configuration.
When I was 20 years old, I went into the short version of the story. I went into a library. Intuition drew me into a particular library that I'd never been into before. I walked to a shelf. I walked in the front door of this library. I walked to a shelf, and I just walked to a shelf. It was like I was being guided, and I pulled a book off the shelf. This day, I don't know who the author was or what the book was. It said basically the problem with the mind is that we always have a thought in it. All you have to do is give it one thought and then forget that one thought. I put the book back in the shelf. I went home that night and I started experimenting with it. Short version of the story is about 5 days later, it happened. I had one thought in my mind and all of a sudden I forgot that. And so the mind was in the same stance, the same configuration as if there had been an object. But the one object just fell away. And this is called objectless samadhi.
Mhm.
So the mental configuration is the same as if there was an object, but the object has fallen away. And so now we have objectless meditation. But if we say it's objectless absorption, that gets a little clumsy to talk about because there's nothing there to be absorbed in. There's no music playing to be absorbed in. There's no romance there to be absorbed in, etc.
There's only absorption itself.
Yeah. So let's see
When
where.
also, Swamiji, in first sutra, when it's mentioned the 5 states of mind, which the last one is Nirodha, with Kshipta and Muda and Vikshipta, they said, and basically in every state you can go into samadhi, but to be in a Kshipta state, go into samadhi on depression,
Yeah.
that's not.
You can go into
very
samadhi
useful.
on depression. Yes.
That's not very useful. So the sense of absorption, that if we look at those when we were completely obsessed or taken over by something not useful, that also is a samadhi-like experience.
Mhm. Very good point. So we should pause. No. Keep going. Keep going. Anyway, so that was fun. It'll be interesting to see what the archive looks like with those couple glitches in there. I presume it will still be there. And
It's so good that people will find it worth it.
Yeah. If
People
they
stuck with us.
well, yeah.
We moved
Yeah.
in and out of
Thank
way.
you for sticking with us in this. And so, all right. And so let's see.
They were so absorbed in this that
They were so absorbed
whether they
in
fell away or not, they were there.
they were in samadhi-like absorption.
We were there constantly.
me.
We were there constantly. That was just, their perception of the screen that went
Yeah,
black.
we were here constantly.
Yeah.
It was your perception that went black.
Yes.
They moved in and out.
Yes.
The boundary line or something. Anyway, this is silly, but life is silly, isn't it? But ought to be fun, huh?
Yes, Roseanne already prepping you.
Push the button.
Oh, thinking about pushing the button. Hadn't thought about it yet. No, okay, I'm going to push the button.
See you in an hour.
That was
people.
fun. Yeah, yes, it was fun. And so we're going to come back in an hour and continue the conversation about Kundalini.
Ooh.
Kundalini. Let's talk Kundalini. We
Oh,
talk.
you got me going.
We talk
Just
samadhi.
Kundalini or its awakening.
Now let's talk about Kundalini. Anyway, I'm going to push the button, Roseanne. Okay. Go on pushing the button. She's what to do, huh?
She's your karma.
Bye, Nelly.
Bye, Nelly. Okay, I'm going to push the button now. Here we go. 3, to remember, silence after Om. That's where all the Nirbija is to be found and all that kind of stuff. All the goodies are in the silence after the Om.
That's where
Short version of the story.
that's the happening.
Okay, bye.